Okay, so this shall be test read aloud for my friends who had that accommodation. Unfortunately, you're going to hear my blink camera system going off a lot, my friends. Okay, so here is our source 1, Stamp Act. All emblem of the effects of the stamp, the Fatal Stamp Act. Okay, that's your source 1. Question 1 says, based on source 1, which of the following best describes what goods the British Empire taxed with the Stamp Act? A, sugar, B, tea, C, manufactured goods, or D, paper documents. You can either color in the letter or circle the letter, the correct answer, okay? Number 2 says using source 1. So you're still using this source. What was the most likely reason the British Empire levied taxes onto the American colonies? Select 2 that apply. You have to get both of them right to get any points for this question. Okay, it's only worth 1 point. Select 2 that apply. A, to control trade between the colonies in Europe. B, to pay for government officials for their loyalty. C, repay debts gained by fighting in the French and Indian War. D, to stop trade of goods smuggled from the colonies. Or E, to pay troops to protect the colonies. Mark your 2 best answers. Okay, source 2, we see an image of a red coat with his back to this gentleman in a blue coat who's looking at a poster. It says tax on tea. Beneath it, it says the Townshend Acts were a series of measures passed by the British Parliament in 1767 that taxed goods imported to the American colonies. Taxes were imposed on British china, glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea imported to the colonies. More than 2,000 British troops were sent to Boston to enforce the new taxation laws. So question 3 says, using source 2, what slogan was created by patriots that argued against taxes that were enforced by the Townshend Revenue Acts? A, give me liberty or give me death. B, no taxation without representation. C, united we stand, divided we fall. Or D, all men are created equal and have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mark the best answer. Pause your video if this is going too fast for you. Okay, guys. So here's an image of the Boston Massacre. And it says the bloody massacre perpetrated in King Street, Boston on March 5th. Let me see if I can read any more of it. Let me see. Party of the 29th Regiment, it looks like it says. Okay, and that says Butcher's Hall, I believe. All right, You'll see a little dog down there at the bottom. It says depiction of the Boston Massacre that was printed in newspapers. Okay, so that is our source 3. Okay, so number 4 says, how did the American colonists react to the acts that were imposed onto them by the British Parliament as seen in source 3? A, they protested the acts. B, they boycotted British goods. C, they petitioned British soldiers to stop enforcing the acts. D, burned buildings and stores of loyalists. Go on to the next page. To your source 4. Boston Port Act. On March 31st, 1774, the British Parliament passed the Boston Port Act to regain control of unruly Massachusetts. The British Parliament closed the port of Boston and insisted it would not be reopened until the British Empire had been repaid for damages caused to the East India Tea Company by the people of Boston. So question 5 says, using source 4, why did the British Parliament impose the Boston Port Act? A, increase the pay for troops protecting Boston against unruly citizens. B, to buy the loyalty of local government officials in Boston. C, reacting against the destruction caused by colonists at the Boston Tea Party. Or D, to impose restrictions against the citizens of Boston for causing the Boston Massacre. Okay, finally, number 6. Based on all the sources, which statement best describes the lasting impact that the acts had on the American colonists? A, it forced the colonists to protest the acts. B, it made the colonists boycott trade with the British Empire. C, it made the nation choose sides to be loyalists or patriots. Or D, it led the colonists to declare independence from the British Empire. Okay, so gonna have to hit next several times to get to the page we need. This would bring us to the first page of questions that I just read aloud. This would bring us to the second page of questions that I just read aloud. So this will bring us to the correct page. Test page 7. All right. Using the quote, we're going to answer the question just below it. England and the colonies have the same roots. A war against England is a war against us. Which group of people does that quote best support? A, patriots, B, loyalists, C, redcoats, or D, bluecoats? That quote would come from which group of people? A patriot, a loyalist, a redcoat, or a bluecoat? This image we've seen multiple times. It says just under it, destruction of the tea in Boston Harbor. Okay. This event occurred to protest which policy of King George III? A, the Quartering Act. B, troops setting up roadblocks in Boston. C, Massachusetts Government Act. Or D, Tea Act. So this picture depicts a protest of what? Quartering Act, troops setting up roadblocks, Massachusetts Government Act, or Tea Act. Okay, next. All right. So this is a table, and the table needs a title. In the rows in the table, are colonists not allowed to speak out against the king? Quartering Act forced colonists to house troops, and no trial by jury was promised. Which of the following best describes the title of this table? So one of these would be a good title to go right here to fit this table. Let's find a title. A, acts imposed by the British Parliament on the colonies. B, patriot slogans against the taxes that were placed on the 13 colonies. C, grievances stated in the Declaration of Independence. Or D, rights given by our Creator that is given to all men. Which of those would make a good title for the table? Number 10. Which statement represents the point of view of a loyalist during the Revolutionary War? Support independence, long live the king, help the committees of correspondence, or abandon the parliament? Loyalist, support independence, long live the king, help the committees of correspondence, or abandon the parliament? Okay, moving on. Okay. So here's a map. Shows United States. I know it's a little bit bright on the computer, but this was area that was disputed by the US and Spain. This was Spanish land. Okay, Spanish land is light gray, Great British land was dark gray, United States was white. Okay, so the question is down here. And I went through and fixed this manually by writing on all 55 copies that I printed. I didn't change it on the digital copy. This should say choose the best two answers. Number 11. Which of the following best describes the impact that the end of the Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris of 1783 had on the 13 colonies? Choose the best two answers. A, the colonies no longer had to pay taxes to the British Empire. B, a new nation was created. C, loyalists left and moved to areas occupied by Spain. D, land owned by the colonies doubled in size. E, the king removed British troops from the colonies. Best two answers. right. Great if this page loaded up. Fabulous. All right, so here is the original version of the picture. This was an engraving by Paul Revere. Okay. Here's the question that goes with it. Paul Revere was a patriot, and he made and distributed this engraving of the Boston Massacre. Which statement best describes why Paul Revere made this engraving? A, he wanted to turn the public against the British. B, he wanted the patriots to stop protesting the British. C, he wanted to make money selling the prints. Or D, he wanted peace between the British and the patriots. And then the bonus question that I added in, this had to do with the lesson that we did yesterday in class. Well, technically today, because it's still Tuesday when I'm recording this, but you'll be doing this on Wednesday. Which of the following did not have to do with the triangular trade that we discussed in class? This is a bonus question. A, manufactured goods transported from England to Africa and to the American colonies. B, natural resources transported from the American colonies to England. C, plantation system transported from England to Africa. Or D, enslaved persons transported from Africa to the American colonies. Okay. Make sure you wrote your name on the test. That is the end of the test. Go back, review all your questions. Make sure you have your best answers. Make sure on number 11, you gave 2 answers, and on number 2, you gave 2 answers. Okay. Your name's at the top of the page, and you answered all 13 questions, because that's a really common thing for my students to not answer all 13 questions. Don't do that. Don't skip any questions. Make sure you answer them all. Okay. Bye.